Hello, Max and Molly and Freddie. It's Granduncle JT again with another Bible story. This one is about Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. We will start the way we always do to get ready. I will play a gong, and please hold out your hand with your thumb pointing up. And when you can no longer hear the gong, turn your thumb sideways. And when I can no longer hear it, I will start the story. So, here's what happened. About 100 years ago, in the city of Atlanta, Georgia, there was a boy called Martin. He had a big sister named Christine, a little brother called A.D., a mama named Alberta, and a daddy also called Martin. Daddy Martin was Martin Luther King Sr., and little Martin was Martin Luther King Jr. Daddy Martin was a preacher, and every night at 6 p.m. he gathered the family for dinner and led them into lively discussions about God and the world. Young Martin heard Bible stories, stories about Jesus, and stories about heroes from the Bible like Moses, who led the people of God out of slavery in Egypt. That meant a lot to young Martin because his own ancestors, his own great-grandparents, had been slaves in America. Even though black people were no longer slaves, many white people didn't think that black people were equal to whites, and they wanted to make sure everyone knew it. In many places, black children could not go to school with white children. Black people could not eat in restaurants with white people. If a black person were on a bus and a white person wanted their seat, they had to get up and move to the back of the bus. When Martin was 6 years old, his best friend, a white boy, said that his parents had told him that they couldn't be friends because we are white and you are colored. This confused Martin. He became angry and sad. Mama Alberta took him on her lap and told him about slavery and prejudice. Prejudice is when somebody doesn't like you just because they don't like the color of your skin. She told him that there are places in the Bible where the people of God overcame slavery and prejudice. He could too. When Martin grew up, he became a preacher like his daddy. He wanted to help black people be equal by preaching about Jesus' teaching that we must love one another and that all people are equal in the eyes of God. Martin's first church was in Selma, Alabama. One day in Selma, a white person got on the bus, and the driver said that the black people had to move to the back. One person, Rosa Parks, had already decided she would never ever again get up to move to the back of the bus. When she refused to move, she was arrested. The black people of Selma were outraged, and they resolved not to ride the buses until they could sit where they wanted. They decided to have a boycott. A boycott is when you refuse to do something for someone to show them how angry you are. They asked Martin to lead the boycott. Martin was scared because he was young and he knew that it would be hard. But he remembered that God had spoken to Moses out of a burning bush and told him to go tell Pharaoh in Egypt to let my people go. Martin decided that God was calling him to lead his people. It was very hard. Most black people in Selma at that time didn't have cars, so they had to walk for miles and miles just to get to work. They faced a lot of anger, but for over a year they stayed united and kept walking, while the buses were almost empty. Finally, the city decided that it couldn't continue with these buses being empty, no one riding the buses. So finally they agreed the buses were desegregated and the boycott ended. But that was only one bus system in one city. All over, black people banded together to fight the laws that made them second class. Martin Luther King taught them that they should do it with nonviolent resistance. That means they should refuse to obey these race laws. And they should not only do that, but you should be very in your face about disobeying them. But they should do it without violence and without hate. They faced a lot of opposition and hate. They were cursed at. They were thrown in jail. They were beaten. Some of them were killed. Martin's own house was bombed, and his family barely escaped. It was hard not to hate back, but Martin kept preaching what Jesus had said about loving your enemy. He taught that hating someone hurts you more than it does them. He taught that the only way to get to a better future is for white and black people to learn to love one another. In 1963, hundreds of thousands of people of all races came to Washington, D.C. to demand change. Martin Luther King stood before them and told them about a dream he had. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. It took years, but many white people changed their mind about the race laws. Other white people decided that they were more trouble than they were worth, and so discrimination by race was finally outlawed. But that didn't mean that black people were always treated equally. Martin Luther King kept demanding change. He said that it was wrong that black people were still being treated as less than. He said that it was unchristian that there were so many people without enough to eat, that it was unchristian that there were so many people without decent housing, that it was unchristian that there were so many people without jobs. America was fighting a war in Vietnam, and Martin Luther King Jr. said that it was wrong. He said that war is unchristian. This made many white people who had agreed with him before angry. They told him that he didn't know what he was talking about. They told him to shut up. At the same time, many black people were also frustrated with him. They were frustrated with how long they had been fighting and were still not equal. They decided that Martin's whole strategy of change through loving your enemy wasn't working. It was very lonely and discouraging at times, but Martin Luther King kept on preaching about change through nonviolence. He remembered that when Moses led the people of God out of slavery, they weren't able to enter the land of Canaan, the land that God had promised them, immediately. They had to wander in the desert for 40 years. Martin felt that he was wandering in the desert. He remembered that Moses wasn't able to enter the promised land himself, but God had taken him to a mountaintop and shown him Canaan and promised that the people of God would enter it and make it their own. In a sermon, Martin told people, I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I might not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. The next day, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed by a man who hated what Martin preached. Martin was buried in Atlanta, where he had been born. But the dream that Martin had lived on. His dream made many of his enemies see what a great American hero he had been, fighting to uphold the greatest values of America. He is the only person who is not a president to have a holiday dedicated to him. But many Christians saw also what a great Christian hero he is. Everything he did was motivated by his deep Christian faith. Like the saints of the old times, he had given his life to witness to the gospel of Jesus Christ. So, that is what happened.